smart ports, connected infrastructure. All of this becomes possible through 5G. When we talk about, things around how, education and healthcare can be completely transformed, 5G is going to be an enabler. Thirdly, when we talk about e-governance, governance could be much better handled when we come to 5G. In terms of data points, a lot of people have forecasted that there could be as many as 1 million 5G connected devices per square mile by 2025. It is also the only technology in which the devices are already ready. You might be seeing all around you that 5G ready devices are available. They are being sold, but the rollout is still pending. So it's a very tricky situation where the ecosystem is ready, but we still don't have the connectivity rolled out. And the last point is the aggregation and amalgamation of IoT, AI, and 5G will truly help in offering democratized intelligence. And I'm sure our panelists will touch upon that how through techniques like classification, clustering, and transfer learning, there are very interesting applications of convergence of these three emerging technologies sitting on top of distributed ledger technology, which is blockchain. With this, without wasting for the time, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panelists. First, we have today with us Sanmeet Singh Kochhar. Sanmeet Singh Kochhar is the Vice President for HMD Global, which is the home for Nokia phones. In this role, he is responsible for driving strategy, operations, and business for HMD Global, and for re-establishing Nokia as a strong consumer brand in India and MENA region by scripting the next chapter for Nokia phones. He's an industry veteran. He's also a mentor with us at IMA Young Leaders Council. He has spent more than 12 years working with companies like Nokia, Microsoft, and HMD, and has held senior leadership positions in sales, marketing, and business. He's a mechanical engineer with MBA in marketing and finance from MDI Gurgaon. He's a truly global professional who has worked in different countries across the globe, and he has pioneered various innovative frameworks like developing the Nokia Partner Channel and Distribution Framework and building the visibility index for Nokia Vino, which is an innovative way to digitally measure retail visibility in independent retail channel across the world. With this, a very warm welcome to you, Sanmeet ji, in today's evening session.
Thank you so much, Kartik. Thanks for a very kind intro and welcome, and a very warm hello to all our viewers. And I am hoping that I can also learn from this session and share my views.
Sure. And I'm going to move on to our next panelist, and with a very warm welcome and folded hands. Prabhu Ram is the head of Industry Intelligence Group at CMR. In this capacity, he advises industry participants on dynamic technology market in India and other Asian geographies through proprietary and custom technology research, cutting across various technology domains. Prabhuji also oversees an analyst team that tracks smartphones, data cards, tablets, display variables, and various smartphones. So he is keeping an eye on all of us as I read, right? Prabhuji regularly undertakes both supply and demand side research projects for tech industry, providing insights and advice from technology market, competitive landscape, and go-to-marketing perspectives. He has over 2 decades of experience ranging from consulting to research across Western Europe and India. He's consistently quoted in various top-tier media, including TOI, ET, and various other media platforms. With this, a very warm welcome to you, Prabhu Ram ji as well.
Thank you, Kartik. Really appreciate this, and thank you to all our viewers. Thank you to Sanmeet as well for having me here. Really appreciate it. And as Sanmeet pointed, and that's something which I personally believe in. I'm a student for life, and I hope to learn from Sanmeet as well as all of you today. As such, yeah. Thank you.
Great. So just the setting of the context, what I would like to understand, and I speak on behalf of our audience here, is that, when we talk about imagining a 5G world, a lot of times I have seen research reports, we have attended conferences in where we talk about, people are saying that with 5G, you got to completely reimagine. It's not the same transition as it was from 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G, but they say 4G to 5G is a complete transformation, which sometimes a common man like us also fails to understand, that how the world is going to be completely reimagined is just an incremental addition of G, right? I'm just trivializing it. So help us understand with your expertise and experience that What do we mean about this transition from 4G to 5G, and what kind of impact do you see having on governance, education, healthcare, and all the broad sectors? I would like to request Prabhuji to start with.
Thank you so much, Al. So I'll take the first part. We'll come to the use cases, after Sanmeet also pitches in. Just to set the context, if you were to look at the last 2 years of the pandemic, we were all at home. Connectivity was what glued us together. Before this, we never knew what this really meant. So we were dependent on connectivity for work, for learning, for entertainment as well. And suddenly an entire generation of Indians joined digital economy as such. And that's what you see in terms of the inflection we are seeing in the digital economy. And beyond tier 2 and tier 3 cities is what we call as rural India. I personally call it as aspirational India. There is a lot of aspiration out there, and they also have joined into the digital economy. And the transition from 4G to 5G, it's not just about fast downloads and all of that. It might be the fifth generation for us. For machines is the first generation. And what we really have to understand is that when we go into this 5G, it will be an amazing experience in terms of not just the way we interact with each other. There will be a whole new use cases which will be possible, cutting across various domains, including education, healthcare, and so on. Just to touch upon education for now, and I'll come back to the use cases later. Imagine our children, or all of you, the young students and as such, who were really over the last 2 years getting onto the calls and attending the classes. You had issues in terms of lags, in terms of voice connectivity being a challenge. Just relate to that experience. The first thing which we always used to say, am I audible as such on a Zoom call? That's what our experience has been so far with 4G. And even today, you might say, hey, 4G is patchy in my area. I have not really experienced it. So what are you talking about when you talk about 5G? While that's true, we are on a great path when it comes to the 5G rollout and all of that. And what would happen next is this kind of interaction that we are having. This would be purely seamless as such. There won't be any dip in latency, which means the sending and receiving information will happen in real time as such. So which would mean that in terms of education, you would feel that you are in the same classroom like all of your colleagues, your professor or your student, like all of them are interacting at the same time. There is no lag at all, and everybody would feel that same experience. So I'll stop there. I'll hand it over to Sanmeet, and then we will come back again.
Thanks so much, Prabhu. That's some great points from you, and Kartik, thanks for touching upon this topic. I think this is phenomenally going to gradually but surely change the way we see the world, right? So today, when we discuss 2G to 3G and then 3G to 4G, we were largely looking at only phones, and that shift was happening from a device. When we talked about devices, it was largely handsets that were moving, but now it is going to be far more than that. It is going to be millions of connected devices, IoT connected devices, which are going to get connected, and that's going to be having a big impact on consumers, on how they behave at home, on businesses, on students, on in healthcare, with governments, with militaries, in every aspect. Each aspect you talk about, there's going to be a world of difference. And so first of all, let me give you a perspective of how it would be. So today, let's say hypothetically, if I'm living in my house, I have 4 or 5 devices which are connected, my phone, my laptop, and my tablet. And tomorrow there would be 50 devices which would be connected to 5G. So it could be my refrigerator, my TV, my light bulbs, my door lock, any and everything that my car. Every electronic device that we would have would be connected to 5G, and everything could be managed remotely. So for example, today when I'm in office and my cat is alone at home and I know that now she's waking up and I need to switch on the light, I can do it from here, and all of that data can be recorded. So, a lot of these changes would happen as we move forward, because, all of these devices would be connected to a network, and, the network needs to be more efficient, and therefore needs to be able to carry so many devices, and thus the 5G network. That is one. Second, in terms of how that would change the world. So one is in terms of data movement is faster, like Prabhu explained, that we'll be able to have much faster data transmission and low latency, and therefore it will be a boon for content creators. So for example, short videos, streaming something from a concert or from a cricket match or something that you want to create and stream live. This is a big boom for those as well, and also people who are working remotely or studying remotely, but also the kind of information that is going to get collected and how artificial intelligence and machine learning then can be applied to take important decisions and help users drive decision making. So for example, let's take an example of healthcare, for example, like since you mentioned. So I have a hospital whose network is connected, and I have wearing a band which is connected to my hospital network where I regularly go to. And then band is always collecting information about me, including my pulse rate, heart rate, etc., and collects millions of data points about people, not only about me, but also about people. And then through AI, we have a learning of how people are responding, what are the incidents or milestones which are there, and then maybe it can predict then when there is going to be an incident, and have there could be some proactive measures that the hospital and I collectively can take. So the point I'm trying to make is there are two kinds of impacts. One is in terms of faster connectivity, and then also in terms of so many data points that we have, and therefore better decision making and predicting what can happen, and then taking steps around that. And also earlier, like I said, just to summarize the point, that we were always talking only of handheld devices and phones, but now we are talking of millions of connected devices around us.
Right. So, Sanmeet and Prabhu sir, my question is that if the pros are so high, and why is the rollout and deployment so much delayed? A lot of people are asking about that. And also, are there other countries in which it has been successfully deployed? What have been the learnings and global case studies? Some scenarios, if you could share from your experience, since, for example, Prabhu sir, you worked in Western Europe significantly. Europe has been ahead of the curve. I was reading that already they are toying with 6G and 7G in some of the Scandinavian countries and in South Korea. So what have been the learnings from some of these advanced countries, which can serve as a learning for us as we plan to roll it out back home in India? So Prabhu sir first, and then Sanmeet.
Sure. Just in terms of the phones, we touched upon that. The fact is that we currently have a large mass of 5G available devices already in play, which would actually help when the networks go live. That's one point which is very important to understand. If you were to look at the previous generations, 4G took us around 5 to 6 years to become mainstream. I suspect this would take less than that, primarily because we have an ecosystem of 5G ready devices all around us. That's one point. The other is that the 4G to 5G shift, it's not a simple case of just looking at faster downloads and all of those use cases what we talked about. It's also, there is so much behind it. As a country, we need to see what are those use cases which would really work out for us. That's why we countries are taking their own time in terms of working out behind the scenes for what the implementation would look like. So there's a lot of study which goes around it in terms of how implementation could happen. And now we are at a stage where we are, going to see 5G rollout happening soon. In terms of other countries, like South Korea, you mentioned, South Korea is actually a leading 5G adopter. We have to see that the first wave of 5G ready countries, all of that has happened over the last 2 to 3 years only. And when you look at 5G and the impact of 5G, it's not easy to just look at it in this narrow prism of fast downloads and all of that we spoke about. Those are the benefit that a consumer would enjoy, but 5G goes far beyond that, as Sanmeet mentioned. So South Korea, for instance, has been leading the pack in terms of the use cases, for instance. So they are already toying with what they call as metaverse. We will talk about that in a minute. But just to tell you, like they are looking at smart manufacturing, which means that there are drones on the factory floor just to see the security as such. There are robots on the floor which are helping or assisting the human capital in terms of the heavy work which is required. Beyond that, smart healthcare, which is something where you already have some of those genesis right now also, like when we look at telemedicine, for instance. So what South Korea has been able to do is have those command centers, which are able to support spokes which are helping with advanced surgeries in a remote location and all of that. So healthcare, the way we know it today, telemedicine, those actually become much more advanced as such. The third is, of course, again, purely from a consumer point. We are in India, we have seen over the last 2 years, and that's something which our research has also borne out. It's basically that gaming has really increased among the youth. There are those serious gamers, there are the casual gamers. As such, when we look at 5G, all of these experiences would become much more, immersive as such. Cloud gaming would come into play. And South Korea today is looking at all of these cases. They are looking at AR, VR, for instance. So when you are in a stadium, you have augmented reality and virtual reality adding to the consumer experience as such. In education, for instance, it's not just about remote education, but immersive education, which is personalized to the student, which is possible now. And they are working with that. So there are a lot of cases, such use cases, which are out there. Again, the fact of the matter is that this is something which I keep hearing again and again. If we as a country are delayed in our implementation, I would say that the shift is so monumental that it requires that much effort in terms of refining the use cases, in terms of getting the implementation right on the ground. And that's what our country is currently doing. The last point which I have, again, because Sanmeet mentioned that, and I thought I'll touch upon that. There is the artificial intelligence, there is the 5G. Today, if you were to look at it, enterprises are in the early stages of AI adoption as such. They're using it for consumer facing as such. They're using it to improve B2B decision-making processes. So artificial intelligence on its own, it's the uptake is there. Our research bears the fact that most enterprises are using AI in one or the other function as such. Verticals across BFSI or healthcare, they're all using AI in one or the other way. And those use cases would really increase in the coming future as such. And simultaneously, what you're seeing is 5G adoption will also increase. Where the real game changer is when the AI and 5G meet, that's like 2 to 3 years far away from now. Yeah, not just for India, but for all the other markets as well. Once that happens, you will see all of those use cases that Sanmeet mentioned, all of those probabilities which today might seem very improbable for us, all of that actually coming to reality. Yeah.
Right. I think you've given a lot of food for thought. Sanmeet, you want to add on to it?
Yes. So thanks, Prabhu. That's very, very good points that you mentioned. So few points from my side. So first, I want to say is that for 5G to come in place, it's not just about one player in the ecosystem, but it's the overall ecosystem. And one, of course, is the devices ecosystem, not just for phones, but also for other IoT devices. Second is the overall network, creating the network, and then creating a consumer price value equation, which needs to be well calibrated to lower the barriers to adoption of 5G. So that is something that we need to look at. And that since the pandemic began, there have been this whole issue around chipsets and semiconductors and shortage around that. So I think we need to look at how the overall ecosystem is going to evolve. And if I look at the smartphones, for example, already today we see in India, let's say 15,000 rupees ballpark, if we look at, that's the price point at which 5G has reached. But still, there is a big market. Even in smartphones, there is 70% of the market which is below 15,000 in the Android space. So there is a big market which is still below 15, in which the chipset prices have not reached that kind of a situation where devices are supporting 5G. And then there are over 300 million 2G users which are still there in India, which are still on the 2G network. So the larger point is that this shift in the ecosystem is not going to happen overnight. This is going to take some time. This is going to require investments, and this is and for the real shift to happen, we can't expect only, let's say, Delhi and Mumbai or few metros to shift and say that now 5G is here. We need to take everyone together in this 5G revolution. And like you said, the people in different cities and in different rural markets in India, everyone needs to move forward. So it is going to take some time. That's the first one. Second is that, see, there is a trade-off between latency and penetration. So as you increase the data latency and fast data, just for our audience, as the data becomes faster, there is a drop in penetration, which means that the network does not cover as the frequency increases, the network is not that widespread. So that is again something that we need to solve for, which means that there needs to be more investment in terms of getting 5G out for everyone. And therefore I believe that this 4G and 5G both in smartphone space are going to coexist for some time. It is not going to overnight shift to 5G. And then if I look at some of the learnings from what is happening, so for example in UAE, and without getting too technical, there is two kinds of solution. One is the standalone solution, and second is the non-standalone. And the non-standalone solution is one where the core of the equipment which is being used for the network is 4G, but then they use the 5G radio on top of it. But then now the operators are moving into a standalone solution where the core is also 5G and the radio is also 5G. So I think this is something that is getting moved, and we need to see how the auction happens in India and what is the time frame that the operators are going to give. Similarly, we also need to see how the device ecosystem is evolving, and therefore the larger ecosystem play, how that moves forward in India and in the rest of the world. This is something that will evolve as we move along.
Sure. And do you guys also believe that in terms of rollout and network deployment, there is also could be a skill shortage? Like, do we have network deployment skilled resources or testers available globally in India? Are there any institutions who are planning for that, or do you believe that that's a quickly adaptable and learnable skill, or do you feel it's going to be a challenge as we roll out in a country like ours?
So if I can come in over here. So one is that, see, I'm not an expert on network building. However, from a devices standpoint, I can say that the vision of our Honorable Prime Minister and the government of India of Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India is something which is taking it forward right now. More and more companies, and including our company. So we are now looking at how we can use Indian EMS partners to manufacture devices in India, and then looking at how we can source more and more components in India. And then, again, this skill set transformation. See, the industry right now for a device manufacturing functions and the ecosystem is in China, and how we can move that ecosystem and parts of that ecosystem in India is something that we are working on along with the government. And this is not something which will happen overnight, but this is something that we are totally committed to.
Sure. Prabhuji, you want to jump in on
just quickly, this is the first generation, and I'm using my words very carefully. We do have all the ingredients which are required in terms of human capital, and I'm not talking about any one skill set, but I'm talking about across the value chain. We do have all of those skill sets which are required, and those are available with us. That's one. And what Sanmeet said, that's very important to understand. This is the first generation where you would see lot of R&D happening in India, and 5G solutions made for India going for the world as such, and that's something which is very consistent with what the PM has also said. And that's something which we would actually see. There are scientists out there who are actually working on solutions, who are working behind the scenes, but all of that would come to fruition as we move forward.
Right. Another important area which I want to take your inputs on is the issue of security and privacy. So a lot of organizations have forecasted that frauds will also happen at an extremely high speed with 5G in place, right? And there have been constraints around how this multi-world cybersecurity would look like in a 5G world. So what are your thoughts on how big or how critical is the security aspect, or is it just over exaggerated? And if it's a legitimate issue, what kind of fail-safe procedures and protocols could be in place to avoid such a situation? So Sanmeet, do you want to go first?
Yes. And so Kartik, first of all, thanks for raising this. This is a very, very important topic, so pertinent, and became even more pertinent in India during the pandemic. And today we see almost every information of ours, including our bank account details, our mobile wallet details, our pictures, our messages, everything is, or what are we searching on Google, everything is saved on our devices, right? All the information is available. And as we move along, I see the security implications in two phases, two points, two aspects rather, right? The first one is that already there's so much of information on our phones, but imagine if there would be 50 devices at our home, and that can happen maybe 2 years from now. But there's something that we need to start thinking from now onwards, that everything at our house is connected to 5G, and all of that data, millions and millions of data points are getting transmitted, right? So, where my car is going, what speed, what direction, then what is happening on my TV, what's happening on my fridge, what am I watching, what am I studying, how am I using my devices, each of these information is getting collated somewhere. Now, it may be not user specific information, because there is a divide between the user data versus the information that is coming. But at the same time, this information is definitely getting collected and then can be used for advertisements, for, there's a breach of privacy that can happen whenever that information is getting collected. The second aspect, which I want to talk about a little, is, and this is an example that we have seen today, that when we have had this conflict in Europe, which is happening today between Russia and Europe, there is a lot of sanctions which are coming in place, and there are companies which have said that we are not going to operate, in that country, or how companies are saying that now banks are saying that we are not going to accept funds from that country. Imagine a situation where some company says that this is how we can impact your network, or this is how the data can be compromised, because you don't know what happens in a stress or a conflict situation. And that is something that we need to always be careful about. So these are the two security challenges. One is the data storage and privacy, and second, what happens when some particular companies or from different countries, they are setting up your network and having devices, both phones and IoT, on which all of that data is passing through that source, right? So this is a big security. This has big security implications for any individual and any country as well, right? So this is something that we need to be very, very carefully taking stock of, and see what solutions we are going to create. Of course, again, I said that this whole steps around what we can create in India, and how we can save a lot of this information in India or in countries where we believe that our data is going to be secure, and how we work with companies with whom we believe that we are going to be secure as we move forward. This is something that we need to be very, very carefully considering as we move forward. But of course, I don't have all the solutions right now, and it's difficult to find in this chat, but this is something that we need to be cognizant of. And even if we don't have all the answers, we definitely need to ask all the questions.
Sure. Maybe Prabhuji, do you want to share some answers if you have any handy?
Not answers, but those are valid points. And the only thing is, like, the other part of this equation, and that's something which is we don't need to be on a 5G era for that to happen. It's already happening as of today. For instance, if we are using one of those navigation tools on our car or anything as such, for instance, when I reach my home, I always get the the voice actually saying welcome home. So they know specifically that I have reached home as such, and so they're saying welcome home. And so that's a personalization which is already happening as of today, and that personalization reminds me of my memories from last year or the year before, all of those data overloads which are happening, and I need to look at such reiterations for me to recollect those memories. So it's a fine trade-off between hyper personalization versus security. And when we look at the this is all of what I said is already happening in today as such in a 4G era. Imagine all of this happening in a connected world of tomorrow, where you already have some of those smart devices at home. Sanmeet pointed out the refrigerator, or for instance our smart devices which are giving those alerts to us, right in the morning, all the way reminders through the day. Imagine all of those, including the security devices which keep track of our home when we are away. All of that talking to each other and talking to even other machines in the neighborhood. And that's a distinct possibility. So again, this is just another aspect of what Sanmeet was talking about. There is the security, there is the hyper personalization which will come to happen in the near future. How do you reconcile that? How much is enough as such? So that's just one more question to the tally as such.
Right. And also a lot of times, and I remember a few months back, there was this famous lawsuit which Juhi Chawla did around health impacts of 5G for whatever it was worth. But there have been a lot of studies, a lot of news articles we have all read about that there would be significant challenges. Some people are saying a few species of flora, fauna will get extinct because of 5G and whatnot. So demystify that bit for us and the audience, that are the health implications real, or is it with any EM based system and spectrum those challenges remain, or is it something special with 5G which one needs to be considered of? I was also reading that a lot of aircraft and air traffic control organization have said that near the airports there are challenges of 5G connectivity. Are those challenges also real, or they are just being some of the hypotheses of any new technology? So help us understand some of the constraints and some of the cons of these technology for a common user.
Yeah, so see, if you look at the social aspects, and like Prabhu mentioned sometime earlier, see, we need to balance the aspects of how we move forward, how to modernize our technology, and what are the social implications of that. So specifically on this point on the airport, even today, when we get into an aircraft, we say that we need to, shut down our network so that it does not hinder the network, with the which the the aircraft is using. So that's something that is happening right now. So I think there could be implications around that, but there are ways to solve it. Similarly, I have seen in different countries which are now trying to get their private network for security. So without getting into the name of the country, there is a country which is looking at how we can hire all the government employees, including different aspects of the government, into their private network and not use the public network for that, to make sure that it is more secure. Now coming to your first point, which is on health impact of 5G. Well, there have been different views and there have been different narratives around that. But my view is that we need to move forward and with speed towards towards the 5G network. In fact, if you look at the devices now in let's say in countries like the US and even most of the European countries, it is over 50-60% of the devices now are on 5G. In fact, support 5G network even in countries where 5G network is not there. So this is going to be the way forward. I don't think there is an option that over there. I think there's something that we need to adopt and move forward.
Sure. Prabhuji, you want to add something to it?
I think Sanmeet has captured it beautifully. The only point is that we always had such debates whenever we were at the point of a new technology, and which is useful as such, to demystify those, to clarify those. But all said and done, there are studies which have pointed out that 5G as such, all these health implications, so to say, those are not really true as such, and these are from other markets as such. Again, I don't want to get too technical, but the point being that it's important to listen to all these points as well. But this has always been the case that whenever we are at the point of a new tech, these discussions have happened. This will keep happening in the future as well.
May I add over there that I think when these things happen, or when some change is happening, it's good to communicate well and over communicate sometimes on what changes in the life. What is the change that tomorrow morning when you get up, or after 2 years, how is your life changing and how is the world going to change, and why is it imperative that we move in that direction, and what is going to be the benefit? So I think it's important to have this communication from the thought leaders in our country today. And I think it's a step in that direction. The discussion that we are doing today, it's a step in that direction. And I think even if we have one small learning from today's discussion, and if we can share it with the wider audience or wider people that we connect with, this is something which helps people become more aware and understand what is there around the change, and therefore the anxiety and apprehension around these changes then reduce amongst people. Because a lot of apprehension is not because that they know that something is going to not work out for them, because they don't know what are the benefits and they are not clear, and they have heard from someone saying something, and that's how all of this creates issues. But I think this is something collectively we need to communicate to the wider audience, not just the responsibility of the government or of the operators or the device manufacturers, but everybody around this ecosystem.
Sure. Yeah, go on. You want to add?
I'm okay. I mean, I was just agreeing to what Sanmeet was saying. The communication is the key, and that as we move forward in the coming months, as such, we should see more of that happening, especially with the rollout in India. Yeah.
Right. So last couple of points, and then I'm going to open it for audience questions as well. In terms of, we've talked about the devices, we've talked about the network, we've talked about the rollout. How critical you believe is the role of governments, especially in current times we live in? How critical is that, which you believe? Because I was reading somewhere that especially when we talk about 5G, there are provisions need to be made around freeing up radio spectrum, which is used in military operations in many countries. Because and you guys are experts, right? So 5G typically works on the concept of network slicing without getting into too much technical details vis-a-vis bandwidth sharing. So that also impacts in terms of sharing of bandwidth, which is used for non-civilian use. So how does that impact, and what kind of policy regulations you have seen in other countries to address these concerns? And lastly, in terms of affordability, we know the auction has still not happened. We don't know the pricing, but in terms of your experience and sort of crystal ball gazing here, what kind of affordability are we looking at for 5G? Is it going to be incrementally more, or will it add to the existing digital divide? Because you mentioned, Sanmi, that a lot of population is still on 2G. So are we looking at completely leapfrogging 2G users into 5G, or do we believe that the affordability is still going to be a key issue? And to the first point of using non-civilian range as well for sharing of bandwidth, do you think that's also possible in a country like ours? Just want to hear your thoughts. So Sanmeet, you can go first.
Yeah, so few points. So one is that government is an important player in the ecosystem, and government is always going to play a very critical role in facilitating the rollout. So, I think that is something which needs to be very well understood, and that is something that we would definitely expect the government to do. Secondly, I don't think there is one size fits all situation or solution that we can have for every country in the world. So each country has its own priorities, has its own challenges, has its own, overall ecosystem, and how they need to approach this. So therefore, just because something has worked in one country, we don't need to replicate in our country. That is the second piece which we need to understand well. Third is that on the rollout, I think that is something which now the government is already talking very, very closely with with the industry, and the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India is also very closely involved in these discussions. And I think these discussions are already happening. There are always going to be some pushes and pulls in this discussion, but the good thing is that this discussion is happening, and government has taken inputs and is continuing to take inputs from everyone. And of course, I can't speak on behalf of the government, but those are the reports that we are reading right now. And therefore, this auction would happen, and then we'll see how the private players are going to set up the network. The operators are going to set up the network, and how these things move forward. The device ecosystem, as I said, is already evolving. And like I explained, they are that above a certain point, we already have devices which are supporting 5G. Now, on your second point on the affordability, and I already mentioned earlier that the consumer price value equation is very important, and we need to see how that is well calibrated to lower the barriers towards 5G adoption. However, it's important that we mention that today the 4G data cost and the LTE data cost in India are amongst the lowest across the world, right? That is also a fact. And it remains to be seen how the auction goes, and what's the kind of investments that are going there, and how the operators are able to price the 5G, and also in some cases bundle it along with the 5G handset and have a very strong proposition for the consumers. But as I said, this is not something which is going to change overnight. This will take time. It will happen in steps and phases, and this is going to take some time before people move on to the 5G network.
Understood. Prabhuji, you want to add on to it?
Yeah, no, I'll just, it's a perfect time for me to go back to what I started with. There were use cases I left there, and I saw in the chat that there were conversations around that, and all of what Sanmeet said is correct, and I wouldn't want to speculate right now in terms of how the future would look in terms of next steps. But purely in terms of, again, what's the role of government in terms of enabling the use cases? just in March, early March, me and Sanmeet met in Barcelona. That's the Mobile World Congress. We saw use cases there specifically for 5G, which were very consumer centric. There were robotics, there were metaverse and all of that. But when we talk about India, again, very specifically, I'll touch upon elements which are out there right now and how that would look in the future. For instance, there is a startup in India which takes care of diabetic retinopathy. It looks into the detection of diabetic retinopathy through a handheld device. It's not a phone; it's a device which takes the images and sends it back to a specialist doctor who's sitting in a urban location, who is able to do the diagnosis and is able to help the patient from losing his vision and so on. So there are those cases, and there's also examples like Arvind Netralia, for instance. This is in South India, and what they do is in rural setups they have hospitals and command and chain centers, covering a large population as such. All of that exists today. So when we talk about 5G, when we talk about the future, almost everything that we want, it's all there in bits and pieces today itself. We are all experiencing it in one or the other way. It's only that the scale of it will become much more. The future I see specifically is the government enabling what I called as aspirational India. There is the digital divide that's as of today, but when we move forward, the digital education, the way we were looking at, that will become immersive in nature. If in school you had biology, for instance, you would remember those dissections we used to do around the frogs and all. That wouldn't be the case going forward. Augmented reality on a 5G network would mean that you are able to do the dissection without harming any of those frogs, and which would mean that for the student, that learning would be much more easier and greater as such. Talking to colleagues, as all of that. Personalized pathways would be possible for each and every of the students, and I'm specifically talking again about, aspirational India. It's not the urban India that I'm looking at. The use cases for urban India will be there. But what we have seen over the last 5-7 years in this current government, when you look at rural India, you are looking at infrastructure upgradation, which is adding value to the lives of the consumers in those regions as such. And that's what's reflected in the growth of the digital economy, whether it be in terms of the UPI statistics or whatnot. So in that sense, 5G is not a game which will happen overnight. It's not as if at day one everything will be sorted. It's a step-by-step process, so we will have to wait and watch. And that's why, to all the questions you had in the last segment, apart from what Sanmeet said, I wouldn't want to speculate further. So thanks for that.
Sure. So I'm going to take, in the interest of time, 3 to 4 questions, if that's okay. So one question I've had is, I think she's part of IMA only, Dr. Anuja. She asking about that how online education will change. So apart from just the fact that the connectivity would be better and there would not be any lags and but do you think any fundamental change will happen in terms of the interaction, in terms of learning outcomes, or do you believe 5G is only restricted towards just improving the user experience around connectivity?
So I think I just touched upon that, with the case of the frog, which I was talking about, for a biology student, when they're doing the dissection in real time, so now it's without the trauma in real, in a virtual world, they are able to experience it. More importantly, what 5G would enable, if you were to look at the last 2 years again, I have personally seen my children go through the entire process of digital education. 2 years back, they didn't know what a laptop was. Today, they are experts in Roblox. They are experts in purely all of those gameplays that are out there. Some of the audience here would understand what I'm talking about. So I have got 2 daughters, so they talk to each other in a physical room, and they talk about meeting in a, near the cathedral. And I wonder where the cathedral is. It's inside Roblox in a virtual environment. Just to the question that was asked, it's not just about connectivity. It's not just about the lags and all of that. It's as seamless as the way it is. Again, Sanmeet and me, I was there in Barcelona, and the one thing which I saw, imagine that, we are talking the way we are talking today in a pure virtual world, where you don't see all of this. We are together in the same room. So for the students, it's a learning where they look around, they see the classroom, all their friends together, the students, all of them together, the teacher right in front. So it's not a case of them shutting down Zoom and going around with playing something else. They're all in a one environment. They can see each other, they can talk to each other. What that means is personalized learning becomes possible. There are students who are very brilliant. They would have their own curated pathway. There are others who might be struggling with something. For them also, this would be possible. And there are startups today in India, Indian startups who are looking at adopting solutions around AI, which would make such edtech cases possible. And as I said before, that's a point which needs to be remembered. AI is on the up curve. 5G is also taking off. When AI and 5G meet, the real magic will happen.
Right. And the next question which we have is from Professor R.C. Bhattacharya. And he talks about that it's good to talk about role of 5G in education, especially when we talk about the urban population. But, how do we solve the problem of digital divide when we talk about tier 2 and tier 3 towns? They still do not have adequate devices. Sanmeet talked about that most of the Android devices are under 15,000. They would have some sort of an inferior infrastructure or chipset. So the question is for you, Sanmeet, what do you think we can do to ensure that, because imagine you have a classroom, somebody is joining through 5G, somebody is joining through 2G, and in the same classroom, we would have so different experiences of the same concept. So how do you believe we can solve this problem?
Yes, so this is a real problem, first of all. And again, the whole ecosystem needs to move towards, in smaller cities as well. So let's talk of different players in the ecosystem. One is, I spoke about how the devices exist today. But as we move forward, as the scale up happens, the chipset prices hopefully would come down, and the overall technology prices always come down as time progresses. So therefore, devices would be available at a cheaper price, definitely. So that is something that will happen as we move along. Like I said, it won't happen overnight, Professor Bhattacharya, but it will definitely happen. But you have raised a very, very important point that, this is something that we collectively, and I personally believe that, if we have to progress as a country, we need to take everyone together. It can't, the whole modernization can't happen only in big cities. So the first part is the device ecosystem, which I'm saying as we scale up 5G and as the business scales up, the prices should come down, has always happened. It happened when phones came in as well, and it happens with 3G, 4G, and it will happen with 5G as well. That's a prediction. Second, on operator network going to 5G. Again, that is something which will depend on how the auction happens, how much investments are different players willing to make, and how soon that operation rolls over to the rural areas. But that is something that is definitely going to take place, not immediately, but as time progresses, that is going to happen. There are no easy solutions on this. However, on your specific question, and question which Dr. Anuja also raised, it is something which can happen in, so for example, if you are studying in a school, see right now the question that you raised was more so when we are studying in an online environment where someone is joining through a 5G network and someone is joining through a 4G network. But then tomorrow, let's say you are face to face in the school, and you can use a 5G network in the school, and you can use a device. Let's say you are studying history or Roman history. You can you can use a device so that people are then using a virtual network, be let's say in the Colosseum or in Vatican City virtually, or in Trevi Fountain, and understand Roman history by being in those places, rather than studying it only by turning the pages of the books. So I think that's going to be the way forward, and we as all of ecosystem players, we need to collectively make efforts to make sure that this growth carries and this progress carries everyone and not just select few.
Right. The last question, in the interest of time, a very practical one, that which skills should we learn and develop to stay relevant in the 5G era? Bang on business. Who wants to take it up?
So, sorry, which skills?
One should focus on learning and developing in a 5G world to stay relevant and lash on to all the opportunities which 5G presents.
Wow.
Jobs kisme 5G.
Sanmeet, you should take that first.
Yeah. So first of all, see, this is a slightly larger point. My very strong view is that, what skills and what should be your area of expertise should be based on your interest areas, first of all, and not how the world around you is evolving, right? So, you need to look at what are your interest areas and what is going to work for you. So let's say you, work towards learning skills in artificial intelligence, machine learning, data processing, but that does not excite you. That is something which is not going to work. But what you need to do is develop skills in what you like. So let's say, since IPL is going on right now, you are interested about, commentating on cricket or creating, some stuff around cricket, right? Now you need to work upon your skills on storytelling and how storytelling is important. And then 5G can be an enabler and tool to communicate that story. So for example, when you are talking about a story, you talk about what happened at Lord's, 10 years back, or what's happening in October. There's going to be a World Cup which is going to happen in Australia, and what are the chances, what's going to happen, how are the grounds, what are the spectators going to be like, so you can talk about storytelling. 5G can be an enabler. But specifically now answering, this is my larger viewpoint, but specifically now answering your question on what are going to be the relevant skills. Of course, artificial intelligence, data sciences, software selling, and even hardware, electronics, hardware manufacturing. There's a big push from the government of India on manufacturing in India. So what can we do around that? SMT, surface mounting technology, or assembly line development, or even not only getting jobs, but also becoming entrepreneurs. There's a lot of startups that are coming on today, which have some solution which is related to IoT, 5G, and machine learning. So there are a world of opportunities which are there, and then people can see what works for them.
Right. Just to add, if suppose your current learning and your current background is not making you possible to follow all of that, you could always come on my side, which means you are an analyst who looks at all these technology developments, and it's a fascinating world. Every day you get to decipher each and every trend. You have to ask or answer questions, and that's in itself is important as such. It's not just about making sense to an audience, but also about communicating what those big trends mean. And that's a profession in itself. That's a skill set in itself. You learn on the job.
Sure. So just final two concluding lines from both of you in terms of what does the future look like in the next 5 years? Are we looking at 60 because some experts have said by 2030 we'll be at 60, or do you think we'll beat those estimates and already be on 7G, 8G? How many Gs are enough? How fast is fast enough? 2 lines each. Sanmeet,
so I think we should right now focus on what is coming. Not think too far ahead. As consumers, we should look at 5G and how 5G can enable us. See, the focus should not be on technology. Focus should be on us. When our work life, our personal life, our entertainment, how that becomes better. So we need to focus on how technology enables us do better, and accept it with open arms. That's what I would summarize this as.
So 5G is not happening overnight. Again, just for the audience to remember. You might hear a lot of things going forward in the coming months as such, but please do note that 4G and 5G will coexist for some time. 6G, we are already, as the minister pointed out some time back, we are already started working on it, the setting of the standards and all of that. So India might take a lead there, but it's a beautiful point what Sanmeet said, and I would love to end it there. Don't look at technology in isolation. Look at how technology enables us, how it has brought all of us together on a platform like this, on a day like today. So yeah, I'll just stop there, just see where it takes you, and thank you.
Thanks so much. With this, we are at the end of today's session. Thank you so much, Sanmeet ji. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the audience joining in. Thank you, Rajni, who is the pillar of strength for Young Leaders Council. Thank you, entire IMA team, for organizing this. Hope you have a great evening ahead. Thanks again for everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.